The cacophony of honking cars and bustling streets was the first sound that met Elara's ears as she woke up. She blinked open her eyes, a gasp escaping her lips. Her apartment, as she remembered it before the world fell to ashes, stood in all its familiar glory. Elara was back from death, back in time. The end of the world was still 3 months away. As she rose from her bed, she couldn't help but run her fingers over the soft sheets, the comfort a stark contrast to the cold, harsh wilderness she had known for the past decade. Her eyes filled with tears, but there was no time to mourn. She had a second chance, and she would make it count. That's when she felt it, a tug in her mind, like a thread pulling her consciousness somewhere deep within herself. Curious, she closed her eyes, focusing on the sensation. She was suddenly standing in an empty, vast space, its dimensions far beyond the confines of her apartment. It was as large as 100 football fields. Her virtual warehouse, she realized, had come into existence. With a thought, she found herself back in her apartment, her coffee still steaming on the counter. Taking a chance, she placed her coffee in the virtual warehouse, and there it stayed, suspended in time. When she retrieved it, it was still as hot as it had been. The reality of her situation hit her like a wave. Elara had an empty warehouse in her mind, where time stood still, ready to be filled with whatever she deemed necessary. The implications of this newfound ability were far-reaching. She could hoard anything she needed for the apocalypse in here. For a moment, Elara allowed herself to feel hope. With her warehouse, she could prepare for the upcoming disaster, maybe even make life a little easier for the survivors. That day, the day of her awakening, marked the beginning of her mission. Elara knew the future and the challenges that awaited humanity. The world was still oblivious to its impending doom, but she wasn't. This time, she would be prepared, waiting for the world to end with 1,000,000 resources. Though gifted with a virtual warehouse and foreknowledge of the future, Elara quickly ran into a daunting obstacle. She was a wage worker with barely enough to pay the bills, and her savings account was far from the treasure trove she needed it to be to gather the necessary resources. With only 3 months until the world ended, she needed to acquire wealth, and fast. She started by reassessing her existing assets. Her apartment, full of furniture and belongings she no longer had a sentimental attachment to, suddenly seemed like a trove of items ready to be sold. She wasted no time in setting up online listings, selling everything from her television to her couch, turning her home into a temporary thrift store. Next, she rummaged through her old boxes filled with memorabilia and collectibles, from comic books to vinyl records, and even an old baseball signed by a Hall of Famer. She researched their worth, finding that a couple of them had appreciated significantly over time. One by one, they found new homes, their sales contributing to her growing fund. Elara also began freelancing. She was a skilled coder, a profession she had abandoned in the post-apocalyptic world, but now she returned to it with a vengeance. She took on small jobs at first, creating websites, fixing bugs, and optimizing systems. Her hard work and efficiency led to more clients and larger projects. She worked tirelessly, often spending entire nights in front of the screen, coding until her vision blurred. But every completed project brought her a paycheck and brought her one step closer to her goal. However, the most significant chunk of her initial wealth came from a bold gamble. She remembered a small startup company that had announced a breakthrough in renewable energy technology 2 months before the end. Their stock at the time was dirt cheap, as they were relatively unknown. But Elara knew that their announcement would cause their share prices to skyrocket. She invested almost everything she had earned so far into their stocks. It was a risky move, but her gamble paid off when their shares jumped in value just as she had predicted. By the end of her first month, Elara had managed to amass $10,000. It was a small fortune compared to what she was used to, but she knew it was just the beginning. This money was the foundation on which she would build her survival plan. She was still a long way from having 1,000,000 resources, but every journey begins with a single step, and Elara was more determined than ever to make it to the end. Elara was running on borrowed time, but her quick thinking and shrewd financial tactics had already begun to pay off. With a clear picture of the timeline leading to the end of the world, she knew exactly where to invest her money. She poured her funds into companies that would soon experience sudden growth. A tech firm developing an advanced cooling technology was one such place. With the onset of extreme heat due to global warming being the first sign of the apocalypse, she knew their stock value would skyrocket. At the same time, she strategically sold off her shares in other companies, perfectly timing her exit to maximize profits. She also invested in futures contracts of certain commodities, aware of the fluctuations they would undergo in the coming weeks. All the while, Elara continued her freelance work, leveraging the growing demand for remote coding skills. She even branched out into consulting, leveraging her past experience in a pre-apocalyptic corporate world. Her money started to multiply. What was once a modest $10,000 had snowballed into an impressive $1 million. She had done it. She had acquired the wealth she needed to begin her preparations for the apocalypse. It had been a race against time and a battle against her exhaustion, but she had prevailed. With just 1 month left, Elara turned her attention towards procuring resources. She created a comprehensive list, factoring in the immediate and long-term needs of survival in a world that would soon be ravaged by extreme heat and other disasters. Food, water, medicine, technology, tools, shelter, knowledge, each category required careful consideration and thorough planning. She began by investing in long-lasting food supplies like canned goods and grains. With her ability to stop time in her virtual warehouse, she also purchased fresh food in large quantities, a luxury she knew would be scarce in the new world. The extreme heat would make water a critical resource. She bought several high-capacity water purifiers and a massive stockpile of purification tablets. She also invested in a range of temperature control equipment, from personal cooling suits to portable air conditioners. Knowing that the grid would eventually fail, she bought solar panels and wind turbines to ensure a renewable power source. A range of other resources, medical supplies, survival tools, digital libraries of crucial information, were also added to her ever-growing virtual warehouse. Each day brought her closer to the looming apocalypse, but with each passing day, Elara's confidence grew. She was no longer a helpless bystander waiting for the world to end. She was a woman with a plan, armed with 1 million resources, ready to face whatever the future would bring. Elara's perception of value had changed drastically since her awakening. The luxurious items she once coveted were no longer relevant in a world on the brink of collapse. Instead, her focus turned to the practical, the durable, the things that could ensure her survival in the aftermath of the apocalypse. With her newfound wealth, she turned her attention towards transportation. In a world ravaged by extreme heat and disaster, mobility would be key to survival. She knew public transportation systems would be amongst the first infrastructures to fail, and the importance of having her own reliable modes of transport could not be overstated. She bought a handful of cars, each chosen for their specific qualities. A sturdy 4x4 for navigating rough terrains, a fuel-efficient compact for longer journeys, and even a van equipped with basic living necessities for situations where she'd need to be on the move for an extended period. All the vehicles were chosen for their durability and ease of maintenance. She also procured a stockpile of spare parts: tires, oil filters, fuel pumps, batteries, everything she might need to keep her vehicles running. She also added a collection of repair manuals and tutorials into her virtual warehouse, ready to teach herself the skills needed to maintain her vehicles when the time came. But Elara didn't stop at cars. She also bought a couple of motorbikes, a boat, and even a small, sturdy helicopter. The latter was an extravagance, perhaps, but if it could make the difference between survival and extinction, it was a price she was willing to pay. After all, her warehouse had space to spare. She dedicated the rest of her time to filling her virtual warehouse with practical necessities, continuing her procurement of food, medical supplies, tools, and other essentials. She left no stone unturned, no possibility unaccounted for. Her life had become a cycle of buying, storing, and planning. But as the days dwindled down and the world unknowingly moved closer to its end, Elara found herself surprisingly at peace. Gone were the luxurious indulgences of her past life. She now found purpose and satisfaction in her relentless pursuit of survival. As the world continued its path towards the inevitable, Elara stood ready. She was prepared to wait for the world to end, knowing she had done everything within her power to face the uncertain future. In her mind's vast virtual warehouse, she had 1 million resources and an unwavering resolve to survive.